Good evening, everyone. Before we start, we want to acknowledge the following distinguished person in the FEU Institute of Education. Dr. Harold Jan D. Kulala, Dean, FEU Institute of Education.
Dr. Chini Aparicio, our department chair.
Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez.
Lecturers.
May I remind everyone that this seminar will be recorded and we are now live streaming through the FEU official Facebook page. Guests and participants, good evening. Why do we not make this night not just incredible, but also a night full of learning and new experiences? We know that many unprecedented events are happening around us as repercussions of the current pandemic. These occurrences greatly influence our personal and professional well-being. Nevertheless, as teachers, administrators, and future leaders, we need to capacitate ourselves to better address these impediments. We are very optimistic that this webinar will provide the necessary, innovative, and relevant information that we can employ effectively to our academic institution in order to redirect them towards success. On behalf of EDUC 373 class, we would like to welcome you all to our webinar with the theme, School Leaders' Excellent Administration, the Key to Organizational Success.
We are your masters of ceremony.
My name is Kevin.
And I'm Lovely. Welcome, everyone. For us to be reminded of the webinar's etiquettes, let us again watch this video.
May we request everyone to settle down for the singing of the Philippine National Anthem and the FEU hymn. Let us also feel the presence of our Almighty God as we offer Him a song of praise and invocation to be led by Miss Lovely C. Torres.
Mga kababayan, ang pambansang awit ng Pilipinas.
Kayang magiliw, pero sa sinakalan, alam ng puso, sa titik mo'y buhay. Upang hinirang, tuyagan ang magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatak tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong pagaw, ay hinatang tulad, awit sa paglayang minamahal. Matawag mo'y tagumpay na naghihingi. Ang bituin at araw niya kailan pa may di magdidinig. Lumalang araw ng walhaging pagsinta, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya ng pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng
Hide me now under your wings. Cover me within your mighty hand. When the oceans rise and thunders roar, I will soar with you above the storm. Father, you are king over the flood. I will be still and know you are God.
Let us bow our heads and place ourselves in the presence of God. Almighty God, our Father, we praise and thank you for this day. We come to you this hour asking for your blessing and help as we are gathered together virtually for this webinar. We pray for guidance in the matters at hand and ask that you would clearly show us how to conduct our work with a spirit of joy and enthusiasm. Give us the desire to find ways to excel in our work. Help us to work together and encourage each other. We ask that we would challenge each other to reach higher and farther, to be the best we can be. We ask this in the name of the Lord Jesus Christ. Amen. To give us welcome remarks, may I call in Dr. Harold John D. Kulala, Dean of the Institute of Education. Let's give him a virtual clap.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much, Lovely and Kevin, our MCs for tonight's webinar. FU community, dear colleagues and guests from other institutions, our students, attendees from different parts of the country and probably some overseas. Definitely our speaker coming from overseas. And everyone who's tuned in on our Facebook Live, welcome to this webinar.
Enter to Bluetooth.
Of the Institute of Education Graduate Programs and Transnational Education, sponsored by the students of EDUC 373 under their Professor Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez. It is my honor to welcome you and share with you a little bit about the Institute of Education. The online lectures is one part of our commitment to deliver quality education, and we want to share to the members of FEU community and other doctoral candidates or postgraduate students outside FEU some valuable and timely information through our competent speakers. The Institute of Education, Department of Graduate Studies and Transnational Education is home to dedicated educators and competent researchers. And one of the best way to um, give quality education is for our students to do hands-on activities like this. And I thank our faculty, Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez, who's our former dean in the Institute of Education. And I'm very happy for our students. They're very lucky to have Dr. Barbie as their professor. The idea of online lectures, as I know, we still want to have a face-to-face lecture, but because of this circumstance, we're now moving our lectures online. But it's also a good thing because we can reach more people now. We can reach other graduate students from different parts of the Philippines and overseas. And being a center of excellence in teacher education awarded by the Commission on Higher Education, we really uphold the value of research, good quality teaching and learning, and we commit to strengthening the teacher education as a discipline in our country. So we are very, very lucky to have our speaker to talk about the theme of this webinar, a school leaders excellent administration, the key to organizational success. And the speaker, I know the speaker so much. She is my former advisor when I was still in college. Sorry, Ma'am Ala, to say that. Si Ma'am Ala, as we call her in FEU, she was a former faculty here in Far Eastern University. And I'm very excited to listen to her. I haven't seen her for a while. And I look forward to listening to her lecture tonight, as I'm sure you will learn a lot from her presentation. So FEU community, colleagues, and guests from other institutions, I welcome you to this online lecture series. Magandang gabi sa inyong lahat.
Thank you, Dr. Harold Jan Bicolala, our ever jolly and warm-hearted dean, for that humbling message.
To introduce our keynote speaker for tonight, may I call in Sir Dian De Ocampo, Institute of Education, doctoral student.
Thank you, Ma'am Lovely. To our beloved Dean of the Institute of Education, Dr. Harold Jan B. Kulala, the Program Head of the Graduate Studies and Transnational Education, Dr. Shini Aparicio, our professor in this course, Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez, friends and participants in this webinar, good evening. It is my pleasure to introduce to you our resource speaker in tonight's event. Our resource speaker is a business management instructor with extensive experience in managing people and projects. Prior to joining Douglas College and Alexander College in Vancouver, Canada, she worked as a university lecturer, program head, and office administrator in the Commerce and Masters of Business Administration departments at Far Eastern University. In her over 10 years of working in FEU, she was actively involved in new program development, campus operations, as well as in academic research, which led to student and faculty exchanges with several partner international universities in Asia. More recently, she also led a team of instructors who developed the 3 new human resource management programs of Douglas College. She also currently the Human Resource Specialization Committee lead in the Business Management Department of the same institution. Aside from working in the academe, she also spent a number of years working in the food, manufacturing, consulting, and alternative banking industries, performing administrative, operational, and extensive people management functions. Additionally, she worked as a corporate trainer delivering professional development courses to Accenture employees as well as consulting work for a non-government organization for a number of years. Her education and training includes a Doctor of Education degree from Far Eastern University, Master in Business Administration degree from the Ateneo de Manila University, and a Bachelor of Science degree from the University of the Philippines. Moreover, she has also taken a Payroll Compliance Administration certificate from the Canadian Payroll Association. On top of that, she was also recently awarded her CPHR designation by the Chartered Professionals in Human Resources, BC and Yukon. Currently, she is in the process of completing her Provincial Instructor's Diploma program at Vancouver Community College. Ladies and gentlemen, let us welcome our resource speaker, Dr. Aurora A. Faundo.
Thank you very much, Tian, for that kind introduction. Thank you very much, Dr. Harold Kulala. I know everyone in FEU knows me as Ala, but tonight I'm Aurora Faundo. Aurora is my real name and Faundo is my married name. Just in case some of you are probably wondering if I am related to the PPA player Faundo, it's my married name, so my husband is the one related to the PPA players with the same last name. Anyway, good morning from where I am in Canada at the moment. It's now 3:22 a.m. in Vancouver. And good evening to every one of you in FEU in the Philippines. And if there's anyone else in other parts of the world, a good day to you as well. So when Dian and I spoke maybe more than a month ago, and he asked me whether I can speak for, in your class, the first thing that he told me was that there were only about 8 students. And so I said, okay, that's fine with me. And initially when we checked the time, it was supposed to be 2 a.m. here in Vancouver, but unfortunately, we already changed. We moved forward about an hour because of the daily saving time. So that's why it's now 3 a.m. Here in Vancouver. And he only told me a few days ago that the attendees are going to actually be more than 8. But anyway, I'm already here and I'm really excited to share with you my thoughts on the topic that Dian asked me to talk about, a leader's excellent administration, the key to organizational success. And it's really a pleasure for me as well to do this, not only because of Dian, not only because of Dr. Barbara and Dr. Harold, but also because it's FEU. And I would like to acknowledge that, of course, part of the kind of thoughts that I have on administration and on organizational success, which I will be sharing with you tonight, is also partly because of my experience in FEU, being a very good employer, and and that's what I'm going to partly talk about with you tonight. So the topic is a leader's excellent administration, a key to organizational success. I am going to talk about both of these aspects. What is excellent administration, and also how are we defining success? I'm also going to share with you a case study. I'm going to open up with a case study. I'm going to talk about Justin Trudeau. Obviously, I'm in Canada. I have to talk about Justin Trudeau, but not only because I'm in Canada and he's Justin Trudeau. It's because there is something about what he did in 2020 when he handled the pandemic in Canada that was noticed by the rest of the world, that he actually ended up being on the #1 power list of leaders around the world. And I would like us to look into what he did that made him be in that position. I'm not saying that I am comparing you or I'm comparing myself with him, but I would like us to focus on the things that he did, and then let's relate it to what I'm going to share with you tonight and see how it's going to be useful to you. Okay, so let me start with that, and then I am going to present to you the outline of how I'm going to continue with my talk here tonight. So Justin Trudeau was recently, this article was just released back in January, where he was actually named as the #1 person on the power list by Maclean's magazine. Maclean's magazine is a prestigious magazine that, very similar to Forbes. It talks about people who are, in their own right, are leaders and are known for something. So he's obviously Canada's prime minister, and he is right now the #1 person on Maclean's power list. And the reason for that is because they noticed that he used more power in Canada in 2020 on a scale that nobody in the country could match. You're probably wondering, what did he do? Why can't anybody match the kind of power that he showed or he used? No one in the history of Canada ever showed the kind of power that he used during the 2020 pandemic. And he's still using it up until now, but it has slowed down a little bit. It has toned down a little bit. So what this #1 list is focusing on is what he did when the pandemic started, when he made a decision back in March up until December. So what are some of those factors that, made him be on that #1 power list? Firstly, he works in Ottawa. Ottawa is the seat of power in Canada. That's where the parliament is. That's where federal government is located. So #1, that's the reason why he is on the power list. Secondly, he leads a minority government. So contrary to the political system of the Philippines, in Canada, whenever we vote for politicians, we vote for a party. We don't vote necessarily for a person. If you like a person, you don't have a choice but to vote for the party. So when election ends, I can't really explain to you how it actually happens. But what happens is that when we say minority government, that means that the representation of his party is not as many as that of the opponent. So that means that being a prime minister, if he needs to push for a bill or for any action that his government wants, it's difficult for him because he might not get the majority vote because he has a minority government. But however, during the 2020 pandemic, that wasn't an issue for him. It was almost always 100% vote for whatever he wanted to do during the pandemic. He also leads a party that is historically been divided into factions. But you know what? In 2020, that never happened. In 2020, Canada was just in Trudeau's country. And this is, I'm quoting this directly from Maclean's. And everyone else was just living in it, which means that whatever he said, everyone followed. There was something different with what he did. These are just a few of the points that would tell you what his administrative skills were, what he did as an administrator of this country, that made him be in this list. And somehow we could say that he was able to move Canada to another year and, claim success for himself. I'm not going to dwell on Justin Trudeau as it is, but I'm going to pick up some of the points that this Maclean's article wrote about him and relate it to how we're going to see ourselves as administrators and how we can use some of the things that he has done in order for him to really be acknowledged in that power list. My goal tonight is not to make you a powerful administrator. That's not the point here. I'm just focusing on Justin Trudeau because I want us to use him as a case study in this case. We're going to focus on you, okay? This is your class. You are the administrator in the schools where you are working. We're going to focus on you. I'm going to share about my experience because I feel that my experience is something that I can personally talk about with you and hoping that it resonates with you as well. So this is how we're going to proceed with my talk for tonight. I'm going to talk a little bit about my background. And the reason for that, just a little bit, I'm not going to talk about my background for the entire hour. I'm just going to talk about my background a little bit because I believe that the thoughts I'm going to share with you and my ideas of how administration should be, or the qualities of a leader, and how success is going to be measured is as a result of my experience. It's as a result of my background, a collective, uh, experience that I have built upon over the years. And just for you to know where is this coming from. Then I'm going to talk about the introduction, what is excellent administration. I'm going to define it based on how the dictionary defines it, and then let's move forward with the other considerations about what is excellent administration. And then we're going to talk about the keys to organizational success. So again, I'm going to talk about this from my thoughts, from my point of view, from my emotions, and as well as relating it to you. And then I'm closing later with what I learned throughout the process of managing organizations, managing schools, and up until now moving to a different country and moving to a different culture where it's not easy to navigate. If you think about it, you're probably thinking, I am in a luckier place because I'm teaching in Canada, and I am probably managing a group of people in Canada. But I tell you, the challenge is even more, because it's now a different culture, and it's not just one culture. You're managing a variety of people with different cultures. So at the end, we're going to reflect on your own practice. I'm going to also share with you my own reflection on administration and success. And again, I'm hoping that it resonates with you. So please, feel free to share or ask questions. I believe that you can send it to the host, and they will be able to send it over to me for some reason or whatever. But please prepare your reserve your questions for the very end of this talk. So let me give you a little bit of a background. I know that Dion has already read, my resume earlier, but let me just share with you a little bit about my background so that I can take you into that context of why I'm going to talk about the topics I'm going to talk about later. So before joining FEU, I work for a fast food company there in the Philippines. And, I always go back, whenever I talk about this with my husband or maybe with my friends, I always say that I'm glad that I worked in that company. I'm glad that I worked in that industry, because a lot of the things that I now know, a lot of the things that I know about management, a lot of the things that I know about administration, I started knowing it there. I started learning it there. And so I cannot ignore the fact that even a job that has nothing to do with education prepared me for this future, prepared me and enabled me to gain skills that eventually I will be able to use when I am an administrator in a school. Then moving on, I started working in FEU in the year 2000. And of course, there was progress along the way. I worked in FEU for more than, I believe, exactly 10 years and a month. And it has always been, of course, as well, a learning experience every step of the way. And I would like you to share in the same feeling. I'm hoping that you're sharing the same feeling, that you value each of your working experience, because they all add up. You always build upon those experiences that make you become a better decision maker, helps you become a better communicator, helps you become a better person, and how you view things eventually, over the years of working in different organizations, whether you were a manager or not. Then after leaving FEU, I moved to Canada with my husband, and I did not immediately go back to teaching. Moving to a different country doesn't mean that the country will immediately acknowledge you. That doesn't mean that the workplace will immediately acknowledge you as the same person when you left your home country. Most of us, if not all of us here as immigrants, we start somewhere that probably is an uncharted territory. Like, I started with a job that has nothing to do with teaching. But again, as I mentioned, any job that you get and any job that you work on builds upon your experience. And again, I'm thankful that I actually started in that non-teaching job, and some of the things that I am now teaching in my courses and the experience that I had there was very helpful in preparing me for my teaching profession. So I was able to go back to teaching again a year and a half after I immigrated to Canada. And I am thankful that I am continuing with the profession that I never thought I will ever be able to come back to. When I moved to Canada, I prepared myself, maybe I'm not going to teach again. And maybe that helped me, prepare myself, that it was a nice surprise that I'm back in teaching. And it was also a nice surprise that I eventually got into Douglas College. So Douglas College is the biggest college in British Columbia. It's not a university, it's classified as a teaching university because we also have research universities, but we're the biggest in British Columbia. And so we serve about 26,000 students, just like FEU, but we have them in different campuses. And I'm still teaching in the business program. So sharing that with you, I will be able to somehow let you understand where am I coming from. So if you look at, the timeline here, you will see that I went through a lot of changes in my career, long term. I did not just move from one job to another every 6 months. That's not how I am. But I spent a number of years with one employer at least. And, for FEU, it was 10 years. And now at Douglas College, I'm now working on my 6th year. I also teach part-time in a private college here where I'm already working on my 8th year. So in the number of years that you spend with the school, with your employer, you learn a lot. If not, you learn, some things, but definitely that is building up. That is all helping you, become a better person, become a better decision maker, and eventually becoming a better administrator, a school administrator, if we're talking about you, of course, being in this course and in this program. I'm also talking to those of you on FB Live. You are not necessarily maybe in an education program, but you are working as managers in your own educational institutions, or maybe in the non-education sector or outside of education. So let's now start looking at the topic itself. Excellent administration, a leader's excellent administration, and the key to organizational success. So what is excellent organization? Sorry, what is excellent administration, or a leader's excellent administration? I would like us to focus on this part of the topic by thinking about where you are. Okay, because as I said, any experience that you have is definitely going to be helpful to you in the future. I got this comic strip from one of the references that I was reading. And I usually use this in my human resource management course, but I would like us to take this in the context of your context, because you are an educational administrator. So before I even define what is excellent administration, before we even talk about organizational success, I would like you to put yourself in the proper context. I'm not going to talk about points that means these are the only definition of excellence. I'm not going to talk about points that define, a specific definition of organizational success, because you are very different from one another. Even the organizations that you work in are very different from one another. And that's mainly one realization that I had moving from the Philippines going to Canada, that even if I'm working in both academic institutions, because I have moved from one country to another, the culture of the country plays a significant role in how the educational systems are also very different from one another. When Diane and I were actually deliberating on how this talk should be, delivered, and the direction of how this should be, delivered to your class, because obviously you are the main audience for this. Diane was sharing with me, because I was thinking, I asked Diane about what are things that you talk about in class, because I would like to make sure that I'm talking to you, that I'm not just talking for the sake of addressing a topic. I want this to be very personal to you, as it is very personal to me when I was preparing this presentation, actually. And so Diane and I were talking about, what you've been sharing in class. Let's say some of you are having, issues, for example, with systems, and things like that. And I told him, you know what, Dian? Everywhere you go, that's how it is. The only difference is that the system there in the Philippines is different from the system here, but they're equally problematic at some point. There's no perfect system. But however, the system that is used there and the system that is used here works for both countries, works for both cultures. We cannot blame and we cannot simply copy one system to the other, because again, there are a lot of factors that plays a role in why the system there works and the system here also works. So it's not a solution that you simply look at the system here and copy it in the Philippines. It doesn't work that way. And that's exactly what this comic strip here is talking about. Our educational system is unique in every country. Because if we make it the same, it is very unfair to our students because it might not work for them. It's also unfair to the teachers because we set the same standard for everyone. But unfortunately, everyone is very different. It says here, Albert Einstein once quoted, and he was talking about the educational system, and Albert Einstein, of course, is talking about the educational system in the US, and he said, everybody's a genius. But if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it is stupid. I'm sorry for that word, but I'm just reading and quoting Albert Einstein here. Which means that you have to accept the fact that systems are very different from one school to the other. Even if, if you're in the Philippines or even if I'm in Canada, every school has a different system. I'm also working for two schools right now. One, I'm full-time in Douglas College, and in the other, I'm working part-time in Alexander College. The systems are very different. And I cannot compare one from the other or compare both of them and complain about the other, because both of them have their own systems, and I simply have to accept that and work with it. So that's where you are. You have to accept the fact. So whether you're working for a public school or whether you're working for a private school or university or a small school, you have to accept the fact where you are and accept the system. Now, maybe you're thinking, well, if it's a system that doesn't work, then why do I have to accept it? Of course, that's why you are there as an administrator. If there's something that you can do about improving the system, then that's the reason why. Let me just quote Stephen Brookfield, if I may just read here from my script. I really love Stephen Brookfield's book, just in case you want to read it as well. The title of his book is The Skillful Teacher. He wrote there in one of the chapters saying, teaching and learning are such complex learning processes, and teachers and learners are such complex beings. And that explains to you why the system is different from one and the other. So learners and teachers are such complex beings that no curricular model or instructional approach will ever apply to all people in all settings. It is indeed true that as educators, we ourselves are as complex as our learners. We both go through events in our lives that changes our situations, views and attitudes about things around us. Yet in the process, it is how we add value to these changes. This is where you come in as an administrator. It is how we add value to those changes that improves our craft as educators. So I'm speaking to you here both as an educator, even though you're an administrator, you're still an educator. So who you are. We already talked about where you are. Let's talk about who you are. As an administrator, especially I'm talking about students who are enrolled in this EDD program, in this course, and for the others who are probably enrolled in other courses in education, or maybe you're a teacher in one of the schools. Who you are, you bring with you a set of skills already. That's why you're in that job. Whether you're a secretary at the moment, or you're a teacher in the first grade, or you're a college instructor, you bring with you a set of skills. And you have to know that. You have to acknowledge that you have the skills. Otherwise, you will not be working in your profession. Robert Katz is known for his skills approach in management. And he says that for a manager to be viewed as effective, that person needs to have 3 kinds of skills: technical skills, human skills, and conceptual skills. Okay, so I know that not all of you are in management, but this is coming from management. And if you are currently teaching in management, you must be very familiar with this. So these 3 skills are necessary for an administrator or necessary for any leader or manager to have in order for them to be viewed as effective. So I'm saying here viewed as effective because you could be viewed as effective by others, but you cannot be viewed as effective by others. So you have to prove yourself really, in your arena as a person who is effective in your job. Effectiveness or being effective means producing a decided, decisive, or desired effect. You must be producing what is required of you. So it really depends on what job you're doing. If you are an enrollment advisor, then obviously effectiveness is measured by the number of people who eventually enrolls in a course, right? Or if you're a principal, whatever are your measures of success, if you reach your success or your critical, what is expected of you, then you are effective. And in order for you to become effective, and I'm sure you have these 3 skills already, but I would just like to emphasize, because you have to acknowledge yourself. You have that skills. Don't ever think that you don't have what it takes. You have it. That's why you're in your job. That's why you chose your profession. So you have to believe in yourself. Technical skills is the way you teach, the way you manage, the way you prepare your lesson plans, the way you prepare your course outline, your course syllabus, that's technical skills. And even the manner of simply teaching your students, that's technical skills. And you have it. You have to be confident that you have it. Conceptual skills is more of planning. So this happens even if you're not an administrator, and more so if you are an administrator, because you have to make plans for your school, for your department, and whoever else you need to plan for. For teachers, if you're not currently an administrator, you also use this as part of your job, planning the day-to-day activities for students, planning for the hour, moving from one class to the next. That's part of the conceptual skills. However, Robert Katz is saying that not all levels of administrators or managers need all of them in equal amounts. Obviously, as you go higher, as you become an administrator, as you become a higher level administrator, you require more conceptual skills, but you do not lose that technical skill, because you need that. You need to understand how teachers do their job. And if you don't understand, with the lack of that technical skill, then it will be difficult for you to become effective in your job. However, if you're not currently an administrator, you need a lot of your technical skill, but you don't necessarily move away from not having conceptual skill, because again, as I said, you do planning on a day-to-day basis as well. But however, Robert Katz emphasizes that of these 3 technical skills, if the technical and conceptual varies at different levels, the human skill remains constant. That's how important the human skills is. Robert Katz is not saying that human skill is more important than technical and conceptual. He's not claiming that. But what he is saying is that it should be the same. Human skills here is what we mean by interpersonal skills, relating with other people. It should remain the same, whether you are an administrator on top, an administrator at the bottom, or a teacher who doesn't have any administrative positions at the moment. That's how important interpersonal skills is. And I would like to emphasize that, because I'm going to touch on that again in the other slides here that I'm going to share with you tonight. And again, talking from my own experience, I have come to realize that it's one of the investments that you can actually make as you move from one job to another, as you move from one position to the next, whether you're moving from one organization to another, or whether you're staying in the same organization. Investing in your interpersonal relationships will get you far. And management textbooks will consistently talk about that. More so in human resources, they will consistently talk about that, because that's the value of your interpersonal skills and the relationships that you have with people. So I've just talked about how I think excellent administration should be thought of, which is, of course, thinking that each of us are in different situations and we have to acknowledge those differences, because we cannot really compare one and say, oh, that's better, this one is not, because each of those situations have their own merits and we have to take advantage of what we can get out of those situations. Secondly, you have to also see yourself as a person with a certain set of skills already, and all you have to do is really improve on each one of those and emphasizing on your interpersonal skills, because that's an investment that you are going to have with you and bring with you to whichever job or whichever country you're going to go to in the future. I would like to emphasize going to another country. I'm not saying that you have to leave the Philippines, but in recent years, I have seen, including Dr. Kulala already, who I know, and a few of his contemporaries who I know have gone to other countries already and have started teaching in another country. And you just have to be prepared that that could be a possible future, right? And you have to prepare yourself that it's a very different world from what you're used to in the Philippines, what you're used to, for example, in the university that you're teaching in. Maybe about 2 weeks ago, I was contacted by, again, another one of, he used to be an MBA student in FEU, and he contacted me. He's now in another country and also just started teaching abroad. And he contacted me about a certain system that he doesn't know. Thankfully, I've been exposed to that already here in Canada. And I also struggled with that system at first because, again, as I said, it's a different culture. It's a different system. And because I've experienced it and I have already come to a point of having accepted that system as it's just what it is. It's how they do things here. And I made sure that I better myself in that system. Then I was able to share with him clearly what that system is for. I didn't want him to go back to the kind of place where I was about 8 years ago when I was struggling with the idea of accepting that system. I can't really discuss it with you because it's, for privacy reasons. And it's a little bit difficult, comparing that system with how we're used to in the Philippines. But having exposed myself and coming to a point of really recognizing that it makes me better by accepting it and understanding that new system, I'm also able to share it with someone who is just starting a career teaching in another country and being exposed to that new system as well. So I'm hoping that, he will be able to navigate his way as well, with, of course, some information that I was able to provide to him. So what are the keys to organizational success? Again, I'm not presenting to you here 3 points that I am saying are you must follow. That's why if you see here, these 3 points are actually very fluid, which means that you don't have to believe in all of them. You can, really say, oh, I don't think that's true. You're free to definitely have your own opinion. But for me, I am sharing this because I'm speaking from my experience. I'm speaking from, what I think would also be helpful to you without really pinpointing that this is how it should be. So this is more fluid, which means that, again, it depends on the situation where you're in at the moment. Okay, so the 3 points that I would like to share with you about the keys to organizational success are, firstly, you have to understand your organization structure. I've already introduced you a while ago to understanding where you are. Okay, and I'm just going to emphasize that again here. Understand your organization structure. Each organization is different from the other. The culture of your organization, again, each one is different from another, and the way they do things. Secondly, connect and communicate with people. And again, I also emphasized that earlier by saying how important Robert Katz was talking about the human or interpersonal skills. And thirdly, highlight loyalty over disagreement. I was discussing this with Diane yesterday, and I said, this might be a very controversial point, but I have to talk about it. I just have to talk about the reality of point number 3 because it will happen anywhere. Even here, I encounter it. But again, it's your experience and it's your interpersonal skills that will bring you, ahead of any disagreement. So let's go to point number 1 first. Understand your organization structure, culture, and the way they do things. I can talk about technical terms, but I'm not going to do that. You know, I'm a management person, I'm an HR person. I will always talk about structure, and that's how I deliver my management courses all the time. I talk with my students about structure and culture, because once they understand how structure and culture dictates the way the organization makes decisions, the way they communicate, then it will be easier for you to understand the rest of how the organization functions. Understanding your organization's culture means you have to know your job very well. You have to know it. You're there for a reason. You have to understand what you are there for. When we apply for jobs, the first thing that we look at, you know, in the Philippines, I'm not sure how it is right now, but here, you know, everything is online already. Whenever you even apply for jobs, you look at websites, you look at, you know, job boards, or even the websites of companies where you want to apply. You look at the job description. These are your list of responsibilities and tasks. It tells you what is expected of you when you start working your job. You also look at the requirements, because both of these are connected with one another. The job description tells you your task, but the job requirements validates that you can do the job because you have the skills, the training, the education. Believe it or not, here, not all jobs require a high level of education. Here, you will find that if you're working as a cashier, for example, the minimum education required from you is at least grade 10, which is equivalent to a high school graduate in the Philippines, you know, during my time, which it wasn't yet K to 12, right? But now that it's K to 12, a grade 10 student can already be a cashier. As young as 15 years old, they can already be a cashier. Why? Because the skills that are required from them and the job description are matched. I'm not saying that you do that in the Philippines. Again, that's where our difference lies, right? We cannot simply copy a system that is effective in one country and say that it will be effective in the Philippines. It's not how it is. Still, you have to understand the reasons. But what I'm emphasizing here is that because you have an understanding of your job description, know your job well and be good at it. Secondly, part of understanding your structure, organization's culture, structure, and the way they do things is you also have to acknowledge your place in the hierarchy and the power dynamics. This can be a very sensitive topic here when we talk about power dynamics, but again, I'm talking realities here. Everywhere you go, even here, there's power dynamics. Even Justin Trudeau has to acknowledge the power dynamics, and that's what he actually used, right? In the case study that I used to open our discussion here tonight, that's what he did. He understood the kind of power that he has. He understood the power dynamics, and that's what he used. Knowing your place in the hierarchy. So that doesn't mean that just because you are at the lower level, there's nothing you can do. Know what you can do because you know your job well. Know what you can do. Know what your organization allows for you to do. Understand how the power dynamics happens, or you know how it is in your own organization. Again, you're all different from one another, so there's no constant definition of how the power dynamics are. I know that if you work in government in the Philippines, it will be very different than if you work in a private sector. So again, understand how the power dynamics is and work with it. This is how, before I continue with my third and fourth points here, because we're talking about power, I would like to read again an excerpt from that Maclean's article about Justin Trudeau being on the #1 of the power list. It says here, just acknowledging how he used power. In good times, when a society and an economy are healthy, the selling pays for the buying. Okay, so that means that it's a healthy economy. You know, people buy, businesses sell, and that's how the economy runs. And most people can earn some kind of livelihood. And I know that you can relate to this because the same thing that's happening here, it's also happening in the Philippines. Amid the COVID-19 conflagration, all of that collapsed. Unfortunately, the buying and selling did not just happen like it would normally do. Somebody had to cover the difference between what people had and what they needed to keep people home, safe, and still within sight of a return to normalcy. Maybe in 2021, we don't know. Who was going to do that? Most businesses couldn't. Businesses was ground zero of the shock. Families couldn't. Household debt was already near the red line. Provincial governments, in our case, that would be British Columbia provincial government, and of course the other provinces as well in Canada have their own provincial governments. Taken together, they came into 2020 with less fiscal room in Ottawa, and Ottawa is where Justin Trudeau is. Only the feds had room to move, and Trudeau has used it. He know his place in the hierarchy. He know that he's the top man in Canada, and he knew he had that power to use the money that the country has, and that's what he did. He recognized his place in the hierarchy. He understood the power dynamics, and that's what he used to fix what was going on in 2020. So the total federal spending doubled in a year. It's scary because the spending is doubled. Where are we going to get the money to pay for that? Which has never happened outside wartime. Checks from Ottawa became the lifeline for households, businesses, and even provincial governments. You know, I can talk about this for hours. I can talk about how Canada is actually recovering from the fear of going into recession, but actually we're not in recession.
Sir Kim.
But what I'm talking about here is how the administrator knew his place in the hierarchy and knew how he's going to use, how he used the power dynamics. And that should be the same as you. I don't know where you work. I don't know your situation. I don't know the problems and the issues that you're encountering with the organizations and the schools that you work for, but work around it. We all go through it. That's why, you know, I kept on repeating what myself, that's where we become better decision makers. Thirdly, invest on each individual and on the team. Again, I'm talking about the culture here. Okay, the first two, I'm talking about the structure. Third point, I'm talking about the culture. Philippines culturally is a very collectivist culture, which means that we always do everything in the group. Apparently, we're also a very individualist culture to some degree, because we have that idea of, you know, I have to think of myself. But then a few seconds later, you think of the rest, right? So there is, generally we are a collectivist culture. That means we focus on the team, but there's also that some part of us that thinks about ourselves. So you have to accept the fact that that's where we are, again, as a country, as a culture. So if you want to invest in your people, invest in both the individual and on the team. Why are you doing that? Why do you have to do that? Again, let me bring you to the point earlier of what is excellent administration. Robert Katz says interpersonal skills. You have to build on each individual. You have to build on your team. And I will even go further with this point later when we talk about reflecting on your own experience. I'm going to bring this up again later. Last point, in understanding your organization's structure, culture, and the way they do things, I'm talking about culture here again, as well as structure. Those who are, you know, have background in management, we call this the level of formalization in organizational structures, because there are organizations that have too many rules. There are others that have fewer rules. Whichever works for you, whichever is your situation at the moment, whether there are too many rules or there are very few rules, follow them. They're there for a reason. You can't just say, oh, let me override that rule and let's move forward and let's make a decision. I tell you, that will haunt you for years. Did I ever come to a point of not following a rule? Of course, when I was starting my career, there would be a few occasions where I would think I would like to find a way around it by ignoring the rules. But I was thankful, again, that's why I mentioned to you my background earlier, because again, in that very first job working for a restaurant many years ago, I was thankful that I worked with that one manager who believed in me, and he never got tired of telling me what should be done. I always remember him for a lot of the skills that I have now. I will always remember him for a lot of the lessons that he taught me. because if there's any that I would like to emphasize, it is him really emphasizing to me that there are rules that we should follow, there are laws that we should follow, and we cannot ignore them. I'm thankful that I did, because if not, I could be, I might be haunted years later down the road that I probably, did not follow a law, maybe if I've broken a law at that time. But I'm thankful that he was always there guiding me, telling me these are rules, these are the law, or this is the law, you must follow it. So we follow them. They're there for a reason. I couldn't tell you, I work for Douglas College. It is a public institution. Here, when you work for the public institution, you're even, you have more rules than when you are in a private institution. There's a lot more rules. Why? Because we're using taxpayers' money. That's how we view it here. When you work in the public sector, you have to even be more conscious about spending, about what you work, how you deliver your work, because you're using taxpayers' money, which means that it's the taxpayers of Canada that's paying us for our salaries. And so we have to be very conscious about how we manage. And that includes finances. I'm not an administrator in charge of any budget, but still, that's how we view ourselves and where we are. Second point in keys to organizational success. Again, you don't have to really believe in all of this, but these are things that I believe, I can share with you as a result of my own personal experience in administration. Second point, connect and communicate with people. I know that you will agree with me here. I couldn't overemphasize the value of interpersonal skills and really connecting and communicating with people. Again, it varies for each of our situations, but I think that one point that I would like to emphasize with you is that no matter what and when possible, okay, because we have to consider we're now in COVID times, so we cannot necessarily be face-to-face with people, but we can do video conferencing. No matter what and when possible, always communicate in person. Then follow up with an email confirmation of the meeting and the conversation that took place. So it's documenting what you have agreed, so that in a future time where you have to recall, ano sinabi ni ganito, ano sinabi ni ganyan, what did we talk about, what did we agree on? It's not anymore he said or she said, but it's documented in an email. So why in person and why in email? If you look at the different channels of communication, which means that these are the how we communicate and the kinds of channels that we choose, or the way we transfer our message to another person or another institution, they have very different richness. Richness means the capacity of that channel to be able to carry, a lot of message, whether they can carry emotions or whether they can, they can travel really fast. Of all the channels, face-to-face communication is the richest of them all. Why? Because it can help you express your emotions. And again, I'm talking about, I will compare different cultures again, because I know that some of you are going to go to other countries in the future. Even though we are talking to a person face-to-face, again, the quality of that face-to-face interaction will be very different, right? But however, the capacity of the face-to-face interaction, it has the highest richness, because we can share emotions, we can see expressions, we can even emphasize distance as to whether that distance is personal or impersonal. That's where you can measure it. And so if you want to really connect and build on your interpersonal relationships with others, do it in person. I will always remember also one of the administrators that I've worked with in the past, who will always, I've learned this from him, that do everything in person when you can. Don't send an email, just to communicate with that person, but do it in person, because there's value in connecting with that person, and that lasts longer. But however, I would like to also emphasize that if you made an agreement, especially if that in-person meeting is about work, confirm with an email. Again, if you compare the different channels of communication, email would be less rich. It's not as rich as video conferencing or a telephone call or face-to-face communication. But however, the email is still a highly acceptable channel in organizations. And I'm sure that you're using this in your workplace as well. So marry the two of them and you will have a very effective connection and communication with people. Again, I'm not saying that you ignore the other channels that you're using. Maybe you still have paper memos. I'm not sure what you're using, but look at the value of these channels and compare them and make sure that you find value in each of them. And again, I would still emphasize in person, but then validate it with either an email or anything on paper. Third is to highlight loyalty over disagreement. Now, I'm not referring here to loyalty as, just being loyal to a person. It's not the kind of loyalty that I'm talking about here. I'm not also saying that in a disagreement, you just avoid a confrontation or you just ignore a confrontation or you just give in to a confrontation. That's not my point here. I know that this can sound very controversial, but here is something that I would like to share with you. Focus on tasks and processes rather than on people when engaging in conflicts. Disagreement and conflicts is a reality of being an administrator, right? You will never be in a position where everyone will agree with you. You will never be in a position where you will agree with everyone or agree with your boss. But however, because you still want to continue working for that company, if you have that desire, if you still want to continue working for that company because you have all the reasons to still continue working for that company, instead of focusing on your emotions, instead of focusing on the person that you're having a disagreement with, focus on the task and the process. Focus on why are you disagreeing about the project? Why are you disagreeing on how you're going to do this? Because if you focus on your task and process, then your desire is to improve and not to destroy another person or not to just focus on destroying your relationship with another person. Everywhere we go, there will always be conflict. I do encounter that here as well. But I think, again, that's why I'm bringing up my own experience, because, again, I think that having worked for educational institutions for 20 years and having built on all my experiences and having built on, my own understanding, my failures and, my successes, I've come to understand that disagreements are normal. We will never be the same as people that we work with. We will always have a different point of view of how others see things. But focus on your task, focus on your process, move forward. Move forward with your team. Don't just move forward alone, move forward with your team. Again, I'm overemphasizing it if I'm not emphasizing interpersonal relationships, because that's what you will bring with you wherever you go. Again, let me go back to our case study about Justin Trudeau, and I am quoting here again directly from the Maclean's article. Justin Trudeau wasn't the person who highlighted loyalty over disagreement, or he wasn't the person here who focused on tasks and processes. But I'm going to talk about one person in his staff that actually made sure that she was emphasizing loyalty over disagreement. Again, as I said, it happens everywhere, right? So the final locus of Trudeau's tactical advantage in 2020 was the Liberal Party itself. This is his party. And again, he's a minority government. Remember that. Every modern Liberal leader have had an internal rival. John Jure had Paul Martin, the article's just quoting here, people who had rivals internally and obviously had disagreements, but I'm not going to read them instead. Each was an obvious successor of the other. That's why they were having disagreements. And they proclaimed loyalty to the opposition. That model never really held for Justin Trudeau, and it collapsed definitely on the day in 2019 when one of his cabinet members resigned, because they had a disagreement, and the disagreement went into a personal level. The act of defiance ended the political career of that person. But here's another focus person that I would like you to focus on. Her name is Chrystia Freeland. You know, you can Google her if you want to. She used to be the foreign minister of Canada who negotiated with the U.S. when Donald Trump was president about the trade agreement between the Canada and the U.S. And she's a very fierce person. What she did was she watched and learned. Instead of disagreeing, she watched and she learned. Since then, she has advanced in the party, the Liberal Party, not by highlighting disagreement, but by making her loyalty to Trudeau even clearer. And again, I'm not talking about loyalty that you're just, backing out from a disagreement or you're just agreeing to everything, but she focused on the task. She focused on the process. When he gets into trouble over his judgment, as he reliably does every few months, this one is talking about Trudeau, Freeland makes a show of declaring her support for him. It's a bit weird, but it's easier to understand once you realize she's not transferring her credibility to Trudeau. She's recharging her credibility within the party by standing at his side. Again, this is what I'm talking about. If you still feel that you want to be working for the company because you have a lot of reasons to work there, focus on the task and the process, because the disagreements and the conflicts will always be there no matter what. But again, you're building on your credibility by doing so. I have a few more slides here, and then I'm going to stop talking. I'm going to shut my mouth. And I was, again, talking about this with Diana last night. I shared with him some of the contents of this talk already. I said, I'm going to end with reflecting with your own practices as a student of this course, and for others who are not attending this course, but to reflect on your own experience and your own practice. How I'm going to close this is actually a collective lesson that I've learned over the years of working with different managers as well, and learning from them. I myself have watched different leaders, different managers, and I've learned and picked up something from them because I know that it's going to make me a better person. And I'm glad I did. One of the mentors that I consider in FEU as my mentor, she knows who she is. I'm not sure if she's here listening tonight, but one of the things that I picked up from her is really being mindful of your ethical responsibilities to yourself and others. Always ask yourself whenever you make a decision, whenever you make a project, you propose something, whenever you handle decisions that you have to make in your respective organizations, in your respective schools, does the act or is the act that you're doing epitomize what is best for those who's affected by it? Ask yourself that question. Does it respect the rights of the individuals involved? Is it consistent with what your school, with what the culture, with what the country regards as fair? I cannot answer this for you because we're all in different situations, right? That's why I had to emphasize that you have to think of where you are, because the only answer to this, you are the only person who can answer this yourself in every decision that you're making. And lastly, whenever you make another decision or propose something, ask yourself the fourth question: is it consistent with people's responsibility to others? Then watch and learn. If you're currently not an administrator, watch how your bosses are doing it. Pick up the good things, learn from the bad things, because together, collectively, you're building upon what you're going to become in the future. If you're currently an administrator already, you still report to a boss, you still report to other upper level administrators, you work with other administrators in the same level. Watch and learn. And this is also, I am also reflecting here on what I've learned over the years, that and this is what I also learned from my other bosses in the past, and from other administrators and managers, not necessarily in the educational arena, is that building again on genuine relationships and creating change together is so much better than being a lone agent of change. I know that some of you are probably in the situation where you're changing systems in your school, you're proposing, changes here and there, but know that you cannot do it alone. It's impossible for one person to do it alone. So again, I will overemphasize the interpersonal relationship that Robert Katz, in his skills approach theory, saying that human skills or interpersonal skills is a very important skill that you need to have as a manager, as an administrator, and you need to use it at every level. And it is where you build upon genuine relationships and creating change together. And when you do that, you will find that it's easier to implement change because you have an ally. You don't have enemies. You will always have enemies, as I said, you will always have conflicts, but you have allies because you have friends. And I'm not talking about friends, but I'm talking about friends in the arena of having enemies and having friends. So building on genuine relationships and creating change together will always be more effective than being the lone change agent. Secondly, understanding the power of your network. Again, I'm talking about things that I've learned from my other bosses here as well, at present and in the past. Understanding the power of your network. Again, interpersonal skills. But what is network? These are people that you have already built relationships on. Maybe they're not currently in your organization. Maybe they work for other organizations. Understand that the relationship that you have with them, again, I'm not just talking of superficial relationships here. I'm talking of genuine relationships that you have with these individuals. That's your network. When I moved to Canada, I did not understand the power of a network. I did learn it from one of my bosses there in the Philippines before, but I did not understand the value of that, not until I moved here. Because in the Philippines, we always see network as, papasok kita kasi anak ka ni ganito, kumpadre ka ni ganito, kailangan mo ng, padrino or something. Here in Canada, especially here in Vancouver, we have a very tough job market because everyone wants to be here. I was just talking with Dr. Barbie earlier that Canada is like the summer, Vancouver is like the summer capital of Canada because we have a hotter weather as compared to the rest of the country. It's still cold, we still have snow, we still get negative temperatures, but still we're warmer than the rest of the country. And so everyone's flocking here, everyone wants to go here. So it's a tough job market. So in order for you to really get a job, especially in a sector or any other job for that matter, it doesn't matter what job you're getting into, you need to have a network. You need to know people who work there who will tell you about the jobs and will refer you. Now, let me clarify this. Referral doesn't mean that even if you don't have the skill, you still get the job. That's not how it works. You still have to compete. That's how I got in both of my teaching jobs. I was referred. So that means I got to know that there's a job opening, but then I had to compete and prove myself that, hey, I have to tell the recruiter and the manager's recruiting, I'm the person for this job. So you have to compete, but without that network sharing with you an understanding of this organization, because remember, a lot of us are strangers in this country. We don't know anyone. So you have to really find your place and prove yourself that you are the best candidate. You use the power of your network. So that's how it is. I'm not talking about the network na padrino ka, you have to go. That's not how it works. So understand the power of that network. Build genuine relationships and understand how it works for you. The third thing that I've learned from bosses that I've learned that I've worked with in the past is being kind to yourself and to others. Being an administrator, it's a very stressful job. You will come to a point where you'll probably just cry because of too much work, because you're so tired, and I cannot even imagine, if we're back, for example, in person, and just remember yourself, just remember a time when you would still commute going back and forth to your work, maybe run errands in between. Just imagine you're already tired with your 8-hour work, and then you have to travel, be in a traffic for 2 or 3 hours every day or even more. And I tell you, I went through all that. I went home to San Pedro Laguna every time, and it's usually about 2 hours one way, depending on the traffic. And you would go home really tired that you come to a point of breaking down because you're so tired. So if you're not kind to yourself, it will also affect others. not just your families, but it will also affect your coworkers. It will also affect your students. You know, if you're in a customer service job, it will affect your customers. So be kind to yourself and to others. And again, believe it or not, I also learned this from one of my bosses that I've worked with in the past. Reflecting on your own experience by continuously improving yourself and knowing your worth. You can never, of course, ignore that you are in the education sector and we have access to tons of professional development courses. You're currently attending one. If you're not really enrolled in this course, you're currently attending one and listening to something that you can pick up and improve yourself thereafter. Or if you're enrolled in this EDD program and taking this course, you are already in the process of improving yourself even further. So do not ignore the fact that every time you hear something, you read something, I encourage you to continue reading. You know, for me, that was my mission when I started, you know, teaching in Canada, to read, to improve my writing, because again, I'm in a different country. The way they write is very different. The way they read and comprehend is also very different from how I'm used to in the Philippines. And so I challenge myself to continually read. Then I can write better essays. Then I can write my own blog, which I'm very proud of. And knowing your worth. You know your worth, know where you are, know that you are an effective manager, and continue improving yourself. I don't know how long I've been talking, but maybe about an hour already. So let me now go to closing my talk. I'm sure that I'm hoping that this is all resonating to you. You know, just think of your own experience. Don't just listen to me and just listen to what I'm talking about here, but resonate and reflect on your own experience of how and what this means to you. Let me close this talk by reading to you an excerpt from the blog that I wrote back in 2013. I just started teaching during that time and I enrolled in a teaching diploma course where part of our requirement was to write several essays. And I'm not sure if Mr. Joven Kasser is here today, but I've shared with him this essay during that time. This is an essay about the ultimate goal of education. And this is where we are as educators. You know, I'm privileged to be an educator. I'm privileged that I'm a Filipino educator, but I would like to speak to you more personally about your being an educator in the Philippines, because you have a very unique situation. I'm already in a different country. My mission has also changed being an educator, because I am now catering to a large group of international students. That's what we have here at the moment. That's our reality here right now in the education sector in Canada. About more than half of our students are international students coming from different cultures. We have students come from India, from China, from Korea, from Iran, from the Middle East, from South America, from Brazil, from Mexico, many other countries. Just imagine the culture mix in your classroom. And when you go to a workplace, you have the same culture mix, the challenges that we face every day by trying to find where's the middle ground. So it's a different struggle. It's a different challenge as compared to the challenge that you have in the Philippines being a Filipino educator. So let me just quote myself here as I read through the next 3 slides, which is the closing paragraph in one of my blogs or essays named The Ultimate Goal of Education. I've included the link there as well in the last slide if you want to read the full essay. So Albert Einstein said, bear in mind that the wonderful things you learn in your schools, I'm talking to you here, are the work of many generations, produced by enthusiastic effort and infinite labor in every country of the world. All this is put into your hands as your inheritance in order that you may receive it, honor it, add to it, and one day faithfully hand it to your children. Thus do we mortals achieve immortality in the permanent things which we create in common. My very presence in the classroom, your very presence in the classroom, or your very presence in the schools that you are an administrator in, is a page in your students' life, in the students that are enrolled in your school, as is my learning experience and your own learning experience in this course or in the everyday life that you are going through as you do your work. And your students can only go forward. You can never bring them back. They will only move forward. So therefore, as an administrator, as a teacher, As a school employee, you have no reason to slow down and think of lame excuses for not improving your craft. As an educator, because in your hands is the responsibility of educating students who will themselves pass on their knowledge to their future generations as an inheritance. But I'm talking to myself too, because again, even if it's a very different scenario that I have here, a different situation, I have the same goal. I have the same mandate. I will continue to remember my grandmother whenever she consoled us for our mother's absence. My mother worked abroad for many years, all throughout my adult life, and she's now finally retired in Australia. But just imagine, going through school, a typical story of a Filipino, right? With an overseas parent, an OFW parent, and who's left caring for us, our grandparents. My grandmother said that we should study hard, very hard, because our education is the only inheritance that our mother can leave us in return. I know you've heard this from your mom. You've heard this from your relatives. Ang pag-aaral mo is the only pamana ng magulang mo sa'yo. Because of their absence, that's the only inheritance that she can leave for us. And my grandmother was right. Because we studied hard, because we did our best, my siblings and I are now able to provide and support the education of our respective families without ever leaving our children behind. And that is liberation. As Filipino educational administrators, we have a very special kind of duty. And it is very different from educational administrators of other countries, as I have shared with you. We are in positions to help liberate our country and its many generations of students from poverty through education. And that is indeed very special, but it's also equally challenging. I would like to thank Mr. Diano Campo and the organizers for your hard work and for making this event possible. I am really privileged to be speaking to you and sharing my thoughts and my own experiences with you tonight. Dr. Barbara Wong, Mom, you just don't know, but you've set a good example for me. I will always admire you for your professionalism and for your kindness. Dr. Harold Kolala, I'm very proud of you. You have done a really good job. And the world is still yours to conquer. And Dr. Chini Aparisha, I've never met you, ma'am, but thank you for your warm welcome. I'm hoping that in the future we get to work together as well, just like as I did with Dr. Harold and Dr. Barbara Wong. To the audience who are watching on Facebook Live right now, thank you for your time. I hope that what you heard from this talk also resonated with you, and also you can build on your own experience over time. I don't know who you are, but thank you very much for spending your 1 hour or 2 hours with me and the rest of the class here, to this wonderful class, for inviting me to share with you my thoughts on effective administration. And to FEU, I will forever be grateful for your kindness, for all the opportunities, and of course the friendships that I still continue to enjoy up to this day. Thank you very much. And I left here my contact information in case you want to email me. It's founder@douglascollege.ca. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And I've also included there a link to the blog that I read to you. And there are many other essays that I wrote there that you may be interested in, since you're also in education. Thank you very much, everyone. And maybe I can already welcome some questions if some of you have. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Paundo, for giving us the opportunity to learn and upskill our capabilities. We promise that our takeaways from your discussion will be efficiently utilized in our respective institution. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you very much. You're welcome.
Allow me to ask only the top 3 questions, considering that we have limited time for this webinar. Good evening, Dr. Paundo.
Good evening,
The
lovely.
first question, this question came from Sir Christopher. So Sir Christopher, here is your question. Why is it important for a leader to listen to the concerns of every stakeholders before doing any decision?
Christopher, thank you for your question. And I think I will go back to my point earlier of investing in the individual and investing in the team. Each one of us have our own leadership styles, different leadership styles. But however, you have to think that the Filipino culture is very collective. So whether you yourself, you are, for example, a very individualist person, or you are a person who favors participation as a leadership style, again, always remember that the Filipino culture is very collective, and you cannot ignore the needs of the group. That's just how it is. You can never ignore the needs of the group. There's just something about listening to the group, right? Listening itself is a skill. That's why even if you take, an English test, you will have listening, writing, speaking, and writing as your 4 skills. So listening itself is a skill, a life skill, not just a managerial skill, but a life skill. And considering that the team, the culture is very collective, I think you will find value that if you do that, you also get the support of people who are working with you. If you do not listen to them, maybe they have a better idea than you. Maybe they have more experience than you, or the other way around. But even so, listening to that group is addressing the culture, the uniqueness of the culture being a collectivist culture, and at the same time, people knowing that they are valued. I hope I answered your question. At least, again, I'm speaking from my own experience here.
Noted on that, ma'am. Sir Christopher, that is the answer of Dr. Paundo for your question. Another question came from teacher Bea. According to her, what is your thought process as a school leader when full cooperation is not achieved and you cannot please everyone?
Again, focus on the task and the process. Focus on that. Because the question is, are the others who do not agree with you decision makers? If they're not decision makers, then they will not have any influence at all in you proposing or making a decision. But if they are decision makers, then you have to consider all sides. Okay, but again, focus on the task, focus on the process, because if you do that, you will be very objective in your proposal, you will be very objective in your decision. If you have built on good and genuine relationships, then you have your allies with you. So how many are those that do not cooperate? Is it a small minority? Is it a majority? If it is a majority, then ask yourself again, have I built genuine relationships with these people? Because if you have not, and they are decision makers, then it will make your life harder. It will make your life a living hell. So again, I can speak for myself. I cannot necessarily say that this will apply to you. Whenever I start in a new organization, whether it's here or whether it was in FEU in the past, I sit down and be quiet for a number of years. Because what I do is I build on friendships. I don't know why I do that. It's just who I am. Maybe I build on genuine relationships. I keep quiet. I watch and I learn. So by the time that I become a manager, people already know me. I have built on genuine relationships, and so it's easier. And again, because I have also learned that over the years, just focus on the process, just focus on the task. If someone hurts you for whatever reason within the team, go out and cry, but then settle yourself and go back to the work. It's not easy to, I'm just saying this because, I'm already I've been in this industry and in this career for more than 20 years. So you can see that I didn't start like this. I did not come to a point of telling you this already because I've already experienced this. But I know it's hard if you're still in a place where you're struggling. But the only thing that I can tell you is focus on the task, focus on the process, spend building on relationships, because when you have built on those relationships, then you have built your allies. Okay, and again, if these are decision makers that you have a conflict with, who are not cooperating, who are not giving you their support, then rethink, build on your relationships with them. Again, I'm talking of genuine relationships here. I have to clarify, these are not superficial relationships that you're building. Genuine relationships, because these are long-term. Okay, you'll never know if you're going to encounter them again in another school. You're going to encounter them, on the sidewalk somewhere, or working with them in another capacity. But when those genuine relationships are established, then you know that you're going to be able to sleep tonight. That's the only thing that I feel, and I think, you will be able to do if you don't have the 100% cooperation. Think of who these individuals are. If they're not decision makers, just focus on the task and go ahead with their decision. But if they are decision makers, rethink your relationships.
For our last question, ma'am, from Ma'am Donna Bell, as an administrator, how can you monitor the effectiveness of your employee during this time? And what are your basic?
You mean at the time of COVID, where everyone is working from home?
Yes po, ma'am.
Okay. I think everywhere we go, it is always a challenge, right? Because if you're already having doubts or issues with your employees, even if you see them every day about their level of productivity or effectiveness, all the more when you don't see them. Again, I cannot compare the Canadian system and the system in the Philippines because, again, they're very different. But as a human, as an HR person, I will always go back to the job description. Your employees have job description. If they don't know what it is, review it with them. It doesn't hurt, because why do you need to review that with them? Maybe your employees will complain, why is my boss telling me about this? But we're going back to a time where everything is going back to basics. We don't know what we're doing. We're all, we have this very steep learning curve, and all of us are learning, what are we doing? We don't understand where we are. And so therefore we have to go back to the basics. If you must discuss with them their job description, do it. But again, I can also share one strategy that you can use, and it is using a leadership theory. And I find this really effective whenever I talk about this with my students, because then they realize, in our discussion, then they will talk about, oh, that's the reason why my coworker isn't like this or isn't like that. Oh, now I know what to do. It's difficult because it's not something that comes naturally to you, but you have to change your leadership style depending on the employee, depending on the skill of the employee that you're managing. Even if it's an in-person in-person work where you see them every day, each of your employees are very different from one another, so you cannot use the same leadership style for all of them. It's tiring for you as an administrator because, again, you're already managing the changes with your job. You're also managing the changes with your employees' job and monitoring them and knowing whether they're effective or not. So number one, review with them the job description. They should know what they do. But then you also have to use the right leadership style for each one of them. You will have employees who they're very confident already in what they're doing, and you don't have to tell them anything more except telling them what you expect from them, and they will deliver it to you on the deadline. I've worked with that kind of staff in FEU, and I'm happy that I did. I mean, I will not name names because I don't want to see, show favoritism, but you know who you are. I've worked with several of them who they just know what to do, and I don't have to really tell them. We don't have to really tell them because they know what they're supposed to do. So you need to just delegate the work with them. But however, don't turn away your attention because they need your attention as well. There are others as well who will partially not cooperate or unwilling to do the job because they're probably demotivated for a lot of reasons. They're motivated that they're not going in the workplace. They're motivated because they have a lot to deal with at home, plus the work that they have to deal at home. Maybe they're demotivated because their internet connection is not as efficient, and they can't work they're not as productive as they used to. So continue to gain that participation from them. There are also employees who just don't know. They're clueless. They don't know what to do. Once they go into their homes, they don't know anymore what to do. And that's probably the kind of employees that you're talking about. How can you monitor effectiveness because they're not being effective anymore? And that's where you're needed to tell them exactly what you expect them to do. If you need to prepare a checklist for them, if you need to do that every day, do it. then you will see them improving in their effectiveness. You will see them increasing in their productivity. It's tiring for you as a leader, so you also have to make your own checklist. And again, be kind to yourself, because there are expectations that are probably too high that you cannot really necessarily get to the point of achieving. So if you have employees who don't know, who are clueless, who can't navigate their way through, working from home and online work, give them a checklist. If you must do it every day, do it. Or if you must do it every week, if that's your timeline for checking on their effectiveness and their productivity, then do it. And continue to motivate them. Yeah.
Last question, Dr. Paundo. Is it okay for you?
Yes, of course.
So from Sir Dian, I will read his question. As an employee, what if the administration is not open for any suggestions?
Then you have to work with it. That's one of the where you are that I was emphasizing earlier. Where you are, you simply have to accept that that is your reality. But that doesn't mean that you cannot improve in your own classroom. That doesn't mean that you cannot improve in your own department. Because even if upper management, they have their own culture, they have their own rules, they have their own structure to follow. There's also the power dynamics there on top that we may not understand if we're at the lower level. You just have to acknowledge that, because they're also working within that power dynamics. But that doesn't stop you from improving yourself. That doesn't stop you from improving your craft, from improving your classroom, or improving the immediate department or immediate vicinity of where you work. Because if that's not something that they dictate upon you, then you are free to improve on that. So, maybe they'll notice, maybe they don't. But at the end of the day, that you did not, you were kind to yourself, and that your worth, and you can only do that by continuously improving yourself. So ignore it, because there's nothing you can do. It's not your school. You're not the top administrator. You just have to accept that fact. And again, they're also at their own level struggling with the power dynamics, the culture, the structure there. So, be contented with where you are at the moment. And, in the hopes that, again, if you still want to continue working for that organization, just focus on your task. Just lower the emotions of being affected and, destroying interpersonal relationships. Continue building on those relationships, because, it's going to eventually grow into something better in the future.
Thank you, Dr. Paundo. We are enlightened about the key towards organizational success. To all the
You're welcome.
participants, let us imbibe in our being the principle of Peter Parker. With great power comes great responsibility. Let us lead by example to motivate teachers to achieve goals in our respective institutions. Thank you.
May I request Dr. Paundo, Mr. Villanueva, and Miss De Guzman to stay on the screen. Thank you. To show our admiration, we would like to award the Certificate of Appreciation to Dr. Aurora A. Pound for sharing her expertise in tonight's webinar. Allow me to read the citations. Far Eastern University, Institute of Education, Graduate Studies, and Transnational Education. Certificate of Appreciation is awarded to Dr. Aurora A. Faundo for her valuable contribution during the IEGSTE Special Lecture on School Leaders' Excellent Administration, the Key to Organizational Success, facilitated by EDUC 373 Seminar in Administrative Thoughts Applied in Education class. Given this 23rd day of March 2021 at Far Eastern University, Manila. Signed by Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez, our professorial lecturer, Dr. Chini M. Dino Aparicio, Department Chair, IEGSTE, and Dr. Harold John D. Colala, Dean, Institute of Education. Similar citation will be given to our diligent sign language interpreters, Mr. Nunil R. Villanueva and Miss Mariel Lia Anica D. de Guzman. Let us all give them a round of virtual applause. Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, sir.
We are about to end this webinar for tonight. Once again, thank you so much, Dr. Paundo. At this juncture, may I call in Dr. Chini Aparicio, our department chair in the graduate studies, for the closing remarks.
Thank you very much, love. Can I just check if you can hear me?
Yes, Doc.
All right. Well, excellent. That's really what I want to say. Even if I'm not really into the area of educational administration, as that's not really my field, it's as it the lecture that was given to us this evening had made me feel that I've taken a course in just an hour or two, because really coming from what Dr. Founders shared with us, I felt how genuine the lessons she had shared with us. And it's as if all these theories about learning are unfolding, and probably all these theories that are covered in the classroom had just been unfolded. I really admire how the lecture had been personalized. So allow me to deliver these closing remarks by recalling a few of the key points that I've gotten from our speaker this evening. Well, one of the things that she had mentioned is we should be able to focus on the task and focus on the process, and in doing so, we should be able to strengthen both the individuals and the teams. And I really love that she reminded me on how I should be able to build genuine relationship with others. In fact, in the past few minutes, all I did was to reflect on my life right now, building relationship and managing people, and of course in the department, and also listening from Dr. Fando. I was able to reflect also on the kind of administrators that we have, and I was able to feel how blessed we are having these administrators that actually are offering us genuine relationship. So thank you very much, Dr. Aurora Foundo, because tonight I'm pretty sure that the people that listen to you did not only get information that would feed their cognition, but they have also been given information that are enough to move them and be motivated in leading people. And with all these that we've heard tonight, I also would like to congratulate our students and the class of Education 373, Edu 373 under Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez for bringing up uh, this lecture that is very much personalized and would really speak of the truth about how difficult yet fulfilling and interesting our role as teachers and as teacher leaders. And if there is something that we would have to bring with us tonight, coming from Dr. Aurora Fondo, it's probably study hard, study well, and lead well. And this is our way of proving that we are not just teachers, but we are also teacher leaders. So once again, thank you very much, Dr. Aurora Founda, to our administrators in Far Eastern University, to this class that handled this lecture seminar tonight, and to all our viewers in Facebook Live and here in Zoom. Thank you very much for joining us tonight and joining us in another life-changing lecture. And there's another thing that I've learned from Dr. Aurora Founda. A true leader and a true administrator is someone that is never afraid to share what he or she knows best, because he or she knows that it is the best way on how to help others and make a big difference. So once again, thank you very much mula po sa amin at mabuhay Tamaraws.
Thank you, Ma'am, Dr. Sheeny, for such good words.
We would like to extend our special thanks to Dr. Barbara Wong Fernandez, to Ms. Mariel de Guzman, and Mr. Nonil Villanueva, our sign language interpreters.
Be reminded to get your webinar certificates. May we request our beloved guests and participants to accomplish the webinar's evaluation. The link for evaluation will be sent through the chat box.
Also, to all the participants and guests, thank you so much for joining us. May we request everyone to open your camera for documentation purposes.
Okay po. Bilang po ako for the picture taking. Ready po tayong lahat for picture taking. Okay, may nag-open pa po ng camera. Let's just wait for them po. Alright, para mas marami naka-open ang kanilang camera. Okay po, ready? 1, 2, 3. Alright, isa pa po kasi dalawa po yung screen natin. Wait lang po . Sa kabilang screen naman po ako. Okay, sa kabilang screen po, ready po. 1, 2, 3, smile po. Okay na po. Thank you very much po.
Thank you, Ma'am Ala.
That ends our webinar for tonight. Good night and God bless us all. Thank you po.